I was just I'm more or less wanting to brush up on like, okay, let's say you got an HSI stake. Let's just say it's, you know, for just random numbers. Let's just say, you know, it's 2,000 hex. Let's just say, or whatever, and let's say it's an HSI. You sell it to the Icosa contract, and let's just say it. I don't know. It gives you a million, you know, Hedron, right? For example's sake. And you know, there was a million mintable Hedron, right? So the Icosa contract goes, and you know, they give you your share of, you know, the Icosa or whatever the value, and then that Icosa contract goes and mints all of the Hedron up front. And let's say that there was a million. Does that, now when that stake goes to liquidation after 3 months because that contract doesn't pay any of that back, is the minimum bid on that stake 1 million Hedron?
If that's what your borrowable amount would be, then yes. You only have to pay back the borrowed amount on that liquidated HSI that wasn't paid back. So the technicalities is 1 T-share locked up in an HSI gives you 5,555,000 Hedron to borrow from. So if you somehow get it liquidated, then yes, the minimum bid to win that back, if for anybody else, would be 5,555,000. Now for you as the individual, to stop it from being liquidated is just make one payment, which is like a couple thousand Hedron or some shit like this, maybe.
Well, sure.
And then it'll just go right back into your
and then
as an individual.
And then if that Hedron now gets, so that's kind of like a wash, right? So the I'm trying to like figure this out. So if I was to, I'm just trying to think, like, let's say let's take Icosa out of the equation for a second. Let's just say it's just me. I just say, fuck it, I want my advance. I'm gonna mint my whole, 15 years. If I have a 15-year stake, and I'm gonna mint it all up front and give it to me, and it's 2 million Hedron, for example. And I don't pay that thing back for 90 days. Now that stake goes to the liquidation market. Somebody else has to bid that 2 million Hedron, correct? Is what you're saying? So
yes.
At minimum, right?
Right.
And so that's kind of like a wash. So how the hell is it paying out to the staker class? How is it? Because isn't a certain percentage of that burned? Like half of that shit's burned, and then the other half.
The winning bid, all of it is burned. You're talking about EES penalties. When you're talking about half of it is burned and half of it is distributed to the stakers, that's a totally different thing.
No.
Yes.
No, I'm not talking about hex. No. I was talking about. I'm just trying to figure out how this.
Yes, and I'm telling you that what you're going down the road of is for the stakers for Hedron and Icosa for the EES penalties. That if you end the stake before the minimum stake length, then how that would work. Half of it, of your penalty, gets burned and half of it gets paid out to the stakers in the Hedron staking and Icosa staking pool as well. However, this is what we're talking about is not concerning the EES penalties.
Okay, fair enough. So how? So people buying the Icosa, let me ask you this way: people bidding on these Icosas, when they bid on that Icosa, people bidding on these HSIs with Hedron, that let's say I win one of these HSIs and it was a $2 million Hedron bid. What's happening with that Hedron? Doesn't it also go to the stakers?
If you win, then it all gets burned. And then the next day at 00 UTC, the Icosa staking pool, the Hedron staking pool, and the Watsa staking pool individually will look at the Hedron contract and it'll ask one question. It'll query one question. How much Hedron was burned that day before? And in that 2 million Hedron that was burned, to win that back, let's say there was no competition, it will see that, and then it'll divide the share rate that day of the hex share rate versus how much Hedron was burned, and then it'll print that up per pool and then pay that out to the stakers and each one with their share percentage will get a share of whatever that was minted that day. So when these auctions come through and all these people are burning all this Hedron, because when you turn in an HSI, you go make one right now and you turn it into the buyback function, you're turning it into a contract that is going to mint you Icosa immediately, and then use that borrow function on that HSI immediately. It's going to take that Hedron from that borrow that the contract itself made, that you don't own anymore, and it's going to pay it directly to the Icosa staking pool. No other staking pool, not the Hedron, not the Watsa. Just the Hedron goes to the Icosa staking pool at that time from that borrow. And then 90 days later, so now you're net negative on all those HSIs that got turned into the buyback function for at least 90 days, right? Because now it's borrowed it, it's already paid it out to the Icosa staking class. It gave away everything that it borrowed. And then they all get liquidated, and then we get to compete for those at the minimum bid of the borrowed amount that made it all net negative. So now we go in there and we pay the minimum bid, and at the very least, we make it all net neutral again. So now all those HSIs now have owners. There may or may not have been some sort of competition that happened between some of those HSIs that caused for more Hedron to be burned in the winning of those liquidations, and only the winning bids are burned. So there's so many different variables of things that can happen during this process because there's so many HSIs that are out there. It's, you're gonna have to manage gas, you're gonna have to manage which ones you're going for, you're gonna have to manage what you value those HSIs are when you do decide to go bid. And that's different. Using that buyback function and selling it to the contract where it does all these things is different than you as the individual using the borrow function on your own. Because when you just use the borrow function on your own, you don't get Icosa, and it's up to you to let it get liquidated or not. And it's probably one of the hardest protocols to actually get liquidated, because you can take 15 years of that borrowed amount and pay off. You don't need 15 years, and you may know that. You can pay off 7 years of that borrow right away, and you've already paid the first 7 years of payment windows on that borrow that you took, like making it even easier for you to make a plan in the next 7 years to cover the rest of the borrow if it was so large that you wanted to do those types of things, right?